Hey guys, in this video, we're not going to look at any fancy plugins. We're not going to have a look at any mixing techniques today. We're going to have a talk about the business side of running a recording studio. So if you run a recording studio or you're considering going into the business of running a recording studio, then you might want to stick around and have a listen to some of these tips and practices that I wish that I knew and had in place when I first started, because there might be some gems here for you. So running a recording studio obviously sounds like a lot of fun. You get to work with artists, create music, do the thing that you love, be around music all day long. So that side of the business is really great and it fulfills that passion that you have for music. But then there's that other side of the business, the money side of the business, where you need to make sure that you're getting paid on time so that you can cover your bills and expenses and also be growing your business at the same time. So the first real big thing I want to talk about is setting expectations. So if you don't set expectations, then you're going to allow a whole lot of issues to come in to your sessions. So for example, when I first started out, I didn't take any deposits from bands. I would just wait until the day when they came into the studio and then they would pay me on the day for the job that they were doing. Now this left the door open for the band to cancel on me at any point. So the day before, I could get a message say, sorry, we're not coming in tomorrow. Maybe we'll come back next week. And for me, that would then be like, a bit of a kick, because you're just like, I've just lost a day of work. I'm no longer getting paid. And now I have nothing to do on that day. So very quickly, it became apparent to me that I needed to make sure I was taking a deposit when I took a booking. So that is definitely something that you guys need to consider doing if you're running a studio, booking bands in for dates. If you want to book them in for a date, consider asking for a half deposit, lock the project in. And by doing that, putting a deposit down, the band or the artist is showing that they're serious about doing this, and they know that you're serious about doing this because you've come into an agreement with them that you're going to be there on that day and they've paid the deposit to be there for it. And so when you're doing these things, make sure you always put it in writing. If you're sending an email, make sure you say, hey, that's awesome, let's book this date in, it's a half deposit, and the other half has to be paid on this date. So you're clearly setting the expectations of how the project's gonna go, when payments need to be made, and you're taking any unknown out of it, and it's making a really clear path for the way the project has to go. No one enjoys talking about money and that side of things, so it's always best to just sort that stuff out from the beginning, and then you can move into the creative, fun part of the process. Now, another side of setting these expectations is letting the client know a turnaround time. So once they finish tracking the project, you can let them know how long it's going to take for them to get their first mix back. If you don't want to be receiving a message every second day, you definitely need to give them a lead time. Or for example, if you're taking on a mastering job and it's just a single track, then you might have a turnaround time of 3 to 4 days. Or if things are busy, you'll let them know that it's going to be a bit longer. But it's always good to give a time frame so that they're not worried about their investment. So something I've always done is like a full production package, which is a set price, which includes tracking time in the studio, editing, mixing, mastering, and a couple of mix revisions. So they get everything needed within this one price. And so within that package though, you need to set clear expectations of what it includes. So communication is always really important. So for example, you need to outline your studio hours. So if you say they get a day in the studio, you need to say how many hours in that day it is. So if it's 10 or 8 hours, that needs to be clear information. You need to let them know that they'll get a couple of revisions, and then after that, they're welcome to keep making changes, but then it switches into an hourly rate as you're going into overtime past what the package includes. So all these things are really important to set yourself up for success. Otherwise, you're leaving gaps in your product, which can cause issues and end up shooting yourself in the foot. And so a funny story with that, very early in my career, I had a band hit me up to come and do some recording. And they said, look, we're keen to come in, track 3 songs. And at the time, I think I was charging like, I don't know, $250 or something. When the band came in and they started recording, and I just remember sitting there and I was like, this song's been going for a really long time. And I waited and we got past about 7 minutes and the song just kept going. So they were laying down the guide track for this song and I was sort of sitting there thinking, what's happening here? Anyway, Keeps going. Get past the 10-minute mark and I'm starting to feel a little bit anxious. I'm like, why is this song so long? Gets 15 minutes. I'm like, whoa. I said, is that like 3 songs in one, guys? And they're like, no, that's just the first song. And so at that moment, I realized what I'd done wrong there is I had not set any expectations or limitations on what a song included when they booked in. So it ended up being something like 38 minutes in 3 songs. And so you can imagine the anxiety I was feeling knowing that I basically agreed to record an album's worth of music for the price of 3 songs. But that was my fault because I didn't have any policies in place. I didn't have things clearly outlined about what was allowed within this package. And so pretty much the next day, there were some policies drawn up about what could be included within this package. I actually think it's really funny now looking back on it. But at the time, I remember sitting there editing through 38 minutes of drums. And so back then it was literally cutting and slicing and moving things around. And I just remember feeling so frustrated with myself about letting this happen. Had no one to blame but me. And so another thing that I'd always kind of let go very early in my career was when I'd be working with a band and they'd be getting near the end of the session and you could just tell they were running out of time. They hadn't practiced their stuff, they weren't very prepared, and they needed a couple of extra hours to really wrap the project up, but we were actually reaching the end of the session. Now, I'd always let them stay a little bit longer and finish the track off, and I wouldn't charge for that extra time. So that's just something else that needs to be in writing, that once we get past the end of this session time, if we need to stay longer, we move into overtime and you can be invoiced for this after the session finishes. Now, this is more on the mixing side of things. Now, if you're a mix engineer and you're offering something like unlimited revisions, that's just a terrible move, and I highly recommend that you don't do that. Setting boundaries and a limitation is actually going to end up with a way better result that everyone's happy with, rather than an endless amount of changing things and doing this. And I bet you by the time you get to revision 10, no one's happy with anything anymore and the mix is falling apart completely. So I try and stick with around 2 to 3 revisions for an artist. And that gives them time to be thoughtful and ask for thoughtful changes when they hear their mix. If they don't just send you back a thing and say, can you change this? And then a day later, can you change this? They'll actually spend some time listening, put a list together, and then it will be well thought out. And even if it's a band, then they can all compare notes and decide collectively what needs to be done, rather than a free-for-all. So as you can tell, there's lots of things here that you need to be thinking about, and what you need to do is compile all of these ideas and put them into a terms and condition. So every time you're talking with an artist and they're booking in to come into your studio to do a job with you, you need to be sending them these terms and conditions that they can look over and know what you're about and what your expectations are, so you guys can be aligned and there's no surprises. And so another great reason for having a terms and conditions and policies in place is it really weeds out the time wasters. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of time that's been wasted on emails, phone calls to people, and then as soon as you mention a deposit is needed to lock in a project, they vanish, they're gone. You never hear from them again. So this is a really quick and easy way to weed out those time wasters and get that information in there as soon as you can, that a deposit is needed to book a project in, and you'll quickly know whether this is someone who is serious about what they want to do. Because if they're serious, this is not a problem at all. And to me, that's always a red flag. If someone has an issue with how you run your business and they fight you on it, this is not someone you want to work with. If you can give them a clear outline of how you operate and what your expectations are, and then they still come back and they complain about it, I'm telling you now that a client like that is not someone that you want to work with, and they're going to be more work and harder to please than anyone. So there's a bunch of stuff there, like the nitty-gritty side of running a business, and some of it can be a little ugly, but once you have it sorted out and you have your policies in place, I assure you all of these bumpy bits in the road start to smooth out and get way easier, because you are communicating very clearly about what you expect and what the artist can expect from you. So if you don't have a terms and conditions document that you can hand over to an artist, I highly recommend that you go and make one immediately. Get all of your expectations and how your studio runs, how payments are made, all of that stuff into a document that's easy to read, and you'll find that all of the awkward situations, any of the uncomfortable stuff revolving around money will start to dissolve in the background as you'll have clear systems in place as to how your business operates, and all that's left to do is make some killer tunes. From a business perspective, you need to have this stuff in place to avoid landing yourself and your client in an awkward situation which could have been avoided with clear communication from the beginning. If you enjoyed this video, maybe stick around for the next one, where I'm going to take you through some of the hard parts of being a creative and running a business.